Today, Kimberly.
Great.
Kimberly. Because I see sometimes. Kim, like Kim.
Yeah.
No Kimberly.
No Kimberly.
No
I
Kimberly?
use Kimberly professionally. Academia, sometimes it's customary to use your full name and middle initial, but
So
I just like to go by Kim.
in the South, everyone has a nickname or they shorten their name or whatever like that. I don't have a short for my name because my name is Lynn, but people like to play jokes on my name, but yeah.
No, just Kim.
No.
No Nick. Well, Jangles.
Jangles?
Yeah.
Why Jangles?
It was kind of like a play on Jenkins, and then also I was used to, not so much anymore, wear a lot of jewelry, so you could hear me jangling down the street.
Well, you have some very
nice...
I
have some jangle.
Yeah? Yeah. So you're the first one that is from the South. So we're both Southern. We're like neighbors almost in a sense of you're from Texas.
Yep.
What part of Texas are you from?
Dallas, Fort Worth. So it's a little more cosmopolitan.
Yes, the great Erykah Badu.
Yeah.
The great Erykah Badu.
She influenced my style a great deal.
Really?
And freedom with style.
Freedom with style.
Yeah. Just freedom, like using dress and adornment to express yourself and explore your identity. She definitely paved the way for me there.
It's kind of funny because the person that I look up to as someone is Andre 3000.
3 Stacks.
Yeah. So that's very good.
I see that.
You know, I until he tells me like, hey, you got the green light from me or whatever, I'll be fine. But thank you. So I wanted to know about. So you're from Texas. I've never actually been to Texas. I'm from the South, but never been to Texas. So can you tell me about just some of the things that, being from Texas, or like some of the things that you remember from your childhood that stood out to you so significantly?
Shopping with my mom. My mom was pretty much a stay-at-home mom growing up, and so going shopping with her. And this is kind of small, but it definitely communicated fashion to me. And it was going to the cosmetic counter, and there was this woman, kind of like back in the day when you'd shop, the person behind the counter or in a certain department, they were there for a long time, and you built a relationship with them for years, and you would always go to that one person at the counter, and they knew what you liked. And I'm sure in many shops that still goes on, but growing up, we would go to the counter, and my mom would always get her same makeup, and I just thought the woman behind the counter was so beautiful. She just carried herself with grace. She had this beautiful dark complexion, and just she was just always just put together. She had this very short haircut. She kind of like reminded me of the model Rashamba, and I was just like, wow. And that's how I started exploring makeup and putting yourself together and things like that. And aside from that, just like catalogs, sifting through catalogs and magazines that I would see sitting around, and I would just study the images, study the people and how they were posing and the clothes and the price of it. Just kind of curious in my young mind, like, what did all that mean?
So besides, looking through catalogs, were there any other activities as a child that expanded your mind outside of Texas?
Outside of Texas, that expanded my mind?
Yeah.
Like traveling outside of Texas?
Maybe traveling, like any activity, like what was one of those, activities that you remember as a child that just really blew your mind and you just knew that, like the sky was the limit?
Well, I had never been to New York until my early 20s, but so it was very mythological. So I always wanted to go to New York, and I would see images of it on TV, so that was something that was just kind of out of my scope of vision, I guess, in seeing that. So the closest, so this is actually within Texas, and Texas is big.
Right.
So as a child, I grew up for the first few years, up until I was 7 years old, in Amarillo, Texas, which is in the Panhandle. So it's very kind of rural, and we have a canyon, Palo Duro Canyon, and It's just very quiet and just small city. And so I remember we traveled to Dallas, which is where we would go on to move. And we were just visiting at the time. And it was at night, and we went to the Galleria Mall, which was this huge, epic mall. And I just remember this one moment I never forgotten. It was we were going down the escalator, and opposite us, going up the escalator, was this guy who was basically like this punk rocker, and he had a black motorcycle jacket and this spiked hairstyle, and it was really tall, like extremely tall. And I just remember staring at him, not like as an oddity or anything. It was just, I was so enthralled with how he looked and what he was expressing through what he was wearing. And that just really stuck with me. And then on the opposite end, and this isn't like a huge significant event or anything, but I was born in Detroit, and my mom's from Michigan. Was from Michigan. And we had a family member, it was I think her cousin's new wife, Darlene. And she was just so elegant. And that's how I started studying women and understanding glamour and elegance. And I just remember these little moments where we were staying at their house for a visit, like over the weekend, and Darlene would just be very adamant. Actually, this is kind of dark, because we were preparing for a funeral. And Darlene needed some dark tights or pantyhose. So she asked my mom, since we were going out to pick up some items from the mall, the local mall there, she was very adamant about, like, I need Evan Picone. I think that's how you pronounce it, or Picone. It was an Italian designer who makes these pantyhose. And my mom was just like, but I just was so fascinated by the fact that
she knew exactly
that
what
one.
She wanted.
I was like, I wonder what that is. And so then I started developing this weird affection for that brand of pantyhose, because I thought, oh, if Darlene likes it, it must be great. Because every little thing, she was just so meticulous and particular. Some people may even take it as being pretentious, but I thought it was just knowing what she wanted. She was glamorous, and she had this beautiful teapot collection, and her color palette in the kitchen was black and white only. You couldn't introduce other colors in there. So I just thought, wow, to have a color palette in your kitchen, and just, because my mom's style was so opposite. It was very rustic and just sort of hodgepodge, eccentric, it just, no frills. But I mean, it was nice, it was refined, but it just wasn't like Darlene.
Right.
So that was one other thing outside of Texas that I experienced, and that started slowly shaping the kind of women I was attracted to as a child, drawn to.
And what your mind was picking up on, you were picking up on what we call details, the small details in life, not even just in people, but in life.
And what we in fashion studies call distinction, those elements of distinction.
Wow. So then you moved on and you were introduced to, outside of, paying close attention to details of your family members, then you got introduced to what we call anthropology. So because people go to school for business, engineering, things that are like a lot of, specific. And who introduced you to the thought of like studying anthropology in school?
It was always, I think it was a natural fit for me, because I was always on the outside looking in, sort of, and always very observant. I was kind of quiet, only child, and I had friends, but I always just had more fun, and I still do, just kind of sitting around and watching people and the way they behave, and how people interact, how cultures develop, how the way we put ourselves together is a product of society and culture. And, to be honest, I never had this smooth trajectory in life, ever. My dad can tell you I've never done things the easy way. So I went through high school, and basically in a nutshell, I went to high school, went to Hampton University first, and went there for a year, dropped out, because I just could not find my direction in life. But at the end, I had a counselor who started, after getting to know me, the counselor there was realizing, you like sociology. I think you like sociology or anthropology or something like that. And I kept that in mind. I put it in the back of my mind and dropped out. Went back to Texas. Dad was not very happy about that. I sat out for a couple of years and then had to kind of pull myself back together and go to community college to get my grades up again. Because I was having like this very young existential crisis. And
what do you call the crisis? Is the crisis considered, I'm going to put out some partying?
No, not at all. I was always a very quiet, creative person.
Because that's the crisis of being 18, 19, and going off to college and stuff like that.
No,
people, yeah.
No, it was actually I was a part of like this poetry group, an activist group. Mm-hmm. Like before Black Lives Matter, it was Spark One.
There was a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were this collective called Spark One, and we did poetry readings. We helped with kind of local, I guess, kind of like African American rights groups, and we staged like a protest for the death of Amadou Diallo. So I mean, that's when I started
becoming a socialist.
Yeah, and it started like I started drawing the connections between activism, politics, fashion. I had put together this band, this arm band I made, and for Amadou Diallo, and just kind of making these connections between the body and how we dress ourselves and what we think about and who we are on the inside, how it's all just kind of intertwined. And so anyway, I ended up dropping out though after all that, and still have those friends today. I made great friends there. Moved back to Texas, went to community college, and once I was in community college, on the very end, I pulled all my grades back up. At the very end, because I was there to transition to a four-year university again. And so I had this really great art history class, and I don't even remember the professor's name, it was over 10 years ago, but the professor just really reignited my love for art and art history, which I just always loved art, and museums. I always loved a museum. And so then I started kind of pulling that together and thinking, I like art, I like culture, even a little bit of religion, politics, all of those things. So once I finished my credits there at the community college, I made the decision to study anthropology, cultural anthropology. And so I went on to the University of Texas at Arlington, in Arlington, Texas, and just took off. Admittedly, I was going, by the time I got to UTA, it was when my peers, my friends, had taken the traditional route and had already graduated by that point. Right. So I was a few steps behind, I guess. But I went in and I had this whole new purpose, and the classes just all made sense, like food and cultural anthropology, kind of 101, culture and personality. It was just the professors.
You're studying. I mean, anthropology consists of archaeology, gender roles, ethnography,
which is
the study
key
of
methodology,
people, nations, and stuff. So in college, I mean, because even I find, or anybody finds themselves when they find out something, it's you feel like a different way, like when you find something that you thought it was, but then it's totally not, because I would think like anthropology is the study of really finding out the truth behind, the history of what is, why do we do this? Why do we do that? Why do people in this specific, area, focus on this portion?
So it has different inflections or aspects. You could go the biological route, or you can do forensics, you can do archaeology, or you can do cultural. And I moved towards cultural. And in general, it's the study of human evolution and culture. Not so much culture if you do the biological route sometimes, or a forensic sometimes.
But I would think it would be very, thought-provoking in the sense of like, because often sometimes in like society within itself, we're often told what something is rather than, taught. If we're outside of the classroom, we're more so told, by our parents or by someone else that this is this and this is the reason why, and then it's just like you're really studying a discipline that really you're reading, writing, you're having to read, write, and research. How did you manage to like formulate and gather like all your thoughts? Like, how did you?
That's where, and probably why, professors have you do papers, because you can kind of process and take in all of these lectures by your professors, but the best part is the final paper, which is typical in most classes. In higher education, you need to write a research paper, and that's where you have a chance to explore what you want to explore. So, I
always feel like those were torture.
I love it.
In high school, I took what is called we call it AP. I mean, a lot of people just call it advanced, like a super advanced class. And I guarantee, in high school, this teacher, she gave us at least like 3 to 5 rights. Poems and research papers and stuff like that. And I just really thought that she was just trying to.
Oh, it's the best. It's what you put into it.
It's like you stretch your. Did you ever look at it as you were stretching your mind?
Yeah, well, but actually, once I got some of the core classes out of the way in the anthropology program, and I minored in art history, I used all the classes I was taking, and by junior year, you can start taking electives that are more kind of on track with what you want to get out of this whole degree. I was able to write papers based on where I wanted my academic and career direction to go. So I started focusing on, or enrolling in all the electives that were focused on non-Western history and just all of the cultural anthropology classes that were of interest to me. And so like one was like American culture. And so through that, I wrote a paper on the dress and performance practices of, or dress practices mainly, of Hare Krishnas. And so of that faith. And that's when my professor allowed me to kind of explore something that was generally unexplored in anthropology, dress and fashion. And then in one of my art history classes, I did my paper on kimono, the kimono, and then I wrote in another class on chinoiserie, the act and history of chinoiserie.
What is that?
So that is kind of like Orientalism. It was this, you saw it over the past centuries in various forms where it basically, it's this fascination, as a nice word, with Asian culture. Gotcha. And so it culminated into these decorative arts like cabinets, teapots, they're mostly porcelain, and that's why I focused on this one porcelain or ceramic factory in Germany, Meissen, and they were like one of the top producers of chinoiserie, which is, now that we look back on it, kind of offensive. Like some of the pieces, it's just very decorative. It's just, they're usually like figurines of Chinese people or Japanese people, or Chinese people. It's just, but it's also fashioned in a way that is beautiful or appealing to a European eye. So those are just some ideas that I was bouncing around as an undergrad, and
that wasn't that particularly just your academics, your studying and everything. It seemed like that wasn't enough, because then you went on to actually working for the Dallas Museum of Art.
Well, so how I got there, it was not as easy basically it was one of my art history professors. She who really helped kind of take me to the next level and became sort of a mentor. After class, we would sit in her office, and she had said, have you thought about grad school? And ever since I was a child, I would have never thought I was cut out for grad school. I had learning issues growing up, and I had highly excelled in writing and reading as a child, but science, math, and even just general logic, I was way behind. And I just always struggled.
So you call that a learning disability?
In the 80s, I always had attention. Many people in my generation
had attention in science. Yeah.
That I think a lot of people did, but I just struggled with grades. And looking back, I didn't think the academic systems that I grew up in were cut out for learners like myself. And so I just started thinking, I think I'm not a very smart person. But once I got to UTA, under the right professors and the right classes, I was challenged in a great way, and I started learning that maybe I am cut out for grad school. So she and I basically, and this kind of sets the course for why I'm here today, she and I would look at programs in her office online and try to find something. This was about 8 years ago, and or 9 years ago almost, and we couldn't find anything. I just kept describing what I wanted to do. I was like, it's anthropology, but it's fashion, but it's culture, and just, why do we wear what we wear? And we couldn't find any grad program at that time that specifically spoke to that, or at least just said that. And so I graduated, and then I just ended up working at this job that had nothing to do with anything for the next 2 years. Meantime, trying to knock on doors of museums and places that seemed to be a great space for what I wanted to do, but every single person, it was just a door in my face, just like, gotta get a master's degree, gotta get a master's degree. So I thought, I think I'm gonna have to try this again. I need to look and see what programs are out there. And so after working a couple years out in the real world, I gave it one more try, and I went on Google, and I just typed in the phrase fashion anthropologist, and only like a handful of things came up at that time. This is 2009, and 2010. And this guy comes up, Alexandru Bălcescu, Romanian anthropologist, spending his time, or splitting his time at that time, in Budapest and Paris. And I started clicking around and looking him up, and it was like this article that called him sort of a fashion anthropologist. And he was doing some research on dress practices and anthropology, just incorporating his work. And so at this time, it sounds a little nuts, but I find him on Facebook, and I friend him, and he's like, I don't know who this person is. And so I just kind of send this message like, look, I really admire what you're doing, and I'm trying to, you're the closest thing that I have right now to what I want to do. So he friends me, and a few months go by, and he doesn't really say anything, because he doesn't know me, and he's on the other side of the world. And so I just keep posting on Facebook about, not in a really staged way, it was genuine. I was just writing about fashion and anthropology. So finally he sends me a direct message and says, have you ever thought about grad school? And I was like, you know what? I really think that's what I need to do. I think I just don't know how or where. So he says, look, I just did this, I contributed to this article or this piece for Valerie Steele. Do you know who she is? And I just thought, oh my God, Valerie Steele, she's this fashion historian, curator, the head person of the museum at FIT. She basically carved her own path, studying history and then just kind of breaking this path of fashion history. She's not by any means the only fashion historian. There's been tons of fashion historians over the past decades, but she's one who really made it accessible and just kind of really brought it to the forefront. And she's one that most people know. Right. And so it was crazy. I was like, yes, I know who Valerie Steele is. And coincidentally, and sometimes I'm superstitious, and I feel like this is all a plan, a friend of mine had just given me a book for my birthday about the little black dress, or about black dresses. And it was sitting like on my coffee table, and it was by Valerie Steele. And she had just given it to me that same week that he said that. And so I just thought, I started like, these dots are just connecting all over the place. And so he and I get to talking, and I poke around on the internet a little bit more around that time, and I discovered that Parsons, the New School for Design, had just unveiled a new program that was launching that fall called Fashion Studies. And as I start reading the description, it was saying, this is perfect for people in sociology, anthropology, art history.
So were you at the museum before you?
So once I locate a program online, build a connection via Facebook with Alexandru, I tell Alexandru, look, I know you don't know me very well, but I kind of, do you think you can help me or guide me? Because I think I found the program for me, and I need to start putting together my resume, my cover letter, and have an application that just sort of blows them away. So to do that, this was late spring when he and I were having this conversation. That summer I started thinking, how can I like really put together an application for them, for this new program, that would just really convey that I am just ideal candidate for this program. So I decided to cold email, since I'm on this whole roll of cold emailing people. I sent an email to the Dallas Museum of Art around August of 2010. And I basically say, look, I'm applying to this program in New York, Parsons The New School for Design, for this new program called Fashion Studies. I've been a member of the Dallas Museum of Art. I've gone there since I was a child. Just kind of telling them a very brief life story of just like, this is what I want to do.
You're pouring your heart out.
Yeah, and so basically I said, do you have any room for a volunteer intern? Like I'm not looking for money, I just need a foot in the door, just something that can give me some museum experience, because I feel like that would be great to add to my resume for this application. So I get an email response, surprisingly, and they said, we're going to pass this along to Kevin Tucker, who's the curator of decorative arts. So then he responds several days later, and he calls me in to his office to meet. So I sit in his office, and which is very intimidating. He's just a really great curator. And now he has this new role in Florida, running a department in a museum, or a museum. So he sits me down and he says, so I looked over your kind of request or inquiry. You kind of know we're a museum for art. We're not a museum for fashion. I said, I understand that. And then he said, but it just so happens we're putting on 2 of our first ever fashion exhibitions at this museum when you emailed us.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my gosh. And he said, the first one, which we're going to roll out, is going to be African headwear beyond fashion. That's going to be put together or organized by the curator of African art, Dr. Rosalind Walker, who at the Smithsonian Museum, and then they brought her over to the Dallas Museum of Art. And he said, and then the second one is going to be called, it's going to be the Jean-Paul Gaultier exhibition, from the sidewalk to the catwalk. And growing up, Jean-Paul Gaultier was one of my favorite designers of all time, so I just quietly exploding inside as he's telling me, and I'm just nodding. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. And so they actually did have a formal internship program, but these interns were primarily focused on decorative arts, fine arts, things like that. Fashion, that was just a little out of their wheelhouse.
You were the control.
I ended up becoming, this was just really a one-off, like once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that they granted to me, but I was a volunteer intern for the curators. Mm-hmm. And so they hired me on. I got a badge, I had an extension, I had an email address, I had a little desk in the mailroom that they kind of just carved out for me to do for these exhibitions, and I was there for almost a year. It was, well, no, it was 8 months. I was there for 8 months. The only reason I left was because I ended up being able to put that on my resume, got into the MA Fashion Studies program, and had to leave to go move to New York.
Wow.
So I unfortunately didn't get to see, I got to help with the Jean-Paul Gaultier exhibition, but I didn't get to see it fully roll out and be unveiled and get to meet Jean-Paul Gaultier when he came in to open the exhibition. So, but I was like, well.
So now you moved to New York. So you say, yeah, I moved to New York. Was there a learning curve, coming from a 4-year traditional university to an art institution?
Sort of, but it wasn't too much. It was actually ideal for kind of going back to what I was saying, my style as a learner and growing up. The New School, which Parsons is situated in, Parsons is a school at the New School. The New School was exactly the kind of school that I needed. And so the way they teach is a little bit different. The way, I don't know, just the general way they do things. It's more innovative to me, a little more progressive. And it was a perfect fit. And so it wasn't maybe, I wouldn't say not rigorous. It was rigorous, but it just wasn't the same experience I may have had if I went to some Ivy League school or some state school, or just like a more traditional school. The New School is not traditional.
With the Masters of Art in Fashion Studies, what specifically does that program, what are they doing to gear, what is the whole, purpose behind that program itself?
Mm-hmm. It's more than just kind of studying why we wear what we wear. That's sort of the broad or more kind of accessible thing that people tend to latch onto, which is what I usually say to people, and they get it. But when you enter the Fashion Studies program, I was actually in the second ever graduating class. So they were still finding their legs, and it was still an excellent program, but it was just starting out. So at the time of our conversation right now, there's been some new classes that have been added, maybe different approaches, a new professor or two. So I had a slightly different experience, but what I think is consistent about the program is it introduces you within the first year to fashion studies, like what is fashion studies, and the myriad ways that we can explore dress. So kind of as you were saying at the beginning of our conversation, it was fashion studies is the intersection of gender and fashion. Fashion studies is the intersection of religion and faith, politics, race, all of those things, music, pop culture, film. And so the Intro to Fashion Studies class kind of introduces you to all of that and all of the possibilities in which you can think about fashion as a phenomenon, as a business, and also as an object.
Yeah, so it's like you take this one thing and they're introducing you to, it's inspired by this, it's inspired by that, this, that, and it's just like, you do that to broaden the mind, to get you to provide some tunnel vision about what you're studying.
And it situates itself as incredibly relevant when you think of other fields of study. Because oftentimes, the whole purpose, what makes fashion studies important is oftentimes we have to deal with the stigma of fashion. Historically, fashion has always been something that as soon as the word fashion comes out of your mouth, a person, depending on the person, thinks, kind of stops taking you seriously.
Right.
It's associated with femininity, and that's a whole problematic thing to unpack in itself, but it's seen as frivolity, unstable because of trends and trend cycles, wasteful, which is why now we have conversations about sustainability, irrational, just Black Friday, people just wanting to shop and just buy things without thinking about who made your clothes or the lives of people who work in factories. And in politics, people are, men typically wear more subdued kind of rational clothing.
Conventional, very conventional and traditional uniform.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you think of fashion in politics, they don't want that. They don't want some bright colors or things like that or patterns, you know. In religion, you know, there's a monastic dress, you know, something that's very subdued, the very opposite of a peacock, you know.
But you took in, like, you've been able to, like, so you took anthropology plus fashion studies, and you started to, in New York, you started to create your own nucleus of opportunities for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you went from, but at the same time, you incorporated the interests of others. You know, you went from, you know, co-founding the Bias, the you know, the Journal of Dress Practice.
Well, first it was Fashion Studies Journal,
Fashion Studies,
and then Bias came from that, Fashion Studies Journal.
And those are, and those two separate things that you co-founded are at Pratt and at Parsons.
Those are both at Parsons.
Both at Parsons.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Fashion Studies Journal kind of has its own legs now and is on its own outside of Parsons. But Bias, which I co-founded, is a journal that remains at Parsons, and it's basically an academic fashion journal for the current students in the program to write for and develop. It's like having their own magazine and running their own magazine. So it gives them that creative platform to kind of get these ideas out. Like if they don't want to write a research paper on something, or if they want to write something that isn't related to their thesis, it's just a way to do that.
So at this point in time when you're creating these ideas, I mean, was there any, you know, stumbling blocks on, you know, having to create like these ideas? Were these ideas of creating like the Bias and the Fashion Studies Journal? Was it more of people saw it as a necessity that it was easy to form, or was it something that you had to really, you know, get everyone on board to like, this is like this, we need this? Yeah,
it was definitely needed.
Mm-hmm.
I also helped create with that a listserv. It's called the MA Fashion Studies Digest, and my first year in the program I was hired on as a program assistant, which is an ongoing role, and so I created a listserv. So it basically is this weekly newsletter that tells you all the things going on to help enrich your time there at school and show you, hey, you know, go to this exhibition at FIT. Hey, there's a great talk going on related to fashion studies in Brooklyn. You know, I would just compile a whole list of things to get students and colleagues to go to kind of get out in the world and see how fashion studies can kind of mingle with the rest of the world, or how you can explore these other experiences and activities that'll help you be a better student or faculty member. So all of those things together, the MA Fashion Studies Digest, Weekly Digest, Fashion Studies Journal, and Bias, sorely needed, and they still go on now today because it gives us a space with this new program, because it's a relatively new field. It's been out maybe over a decade. I'd say maybe almost 20 years, probably fashion studies has been around, but formally, but it's really started becoming popular in the last 10 years, and as a new field, and it's a completely new program at Parsons, there's still students who need guidance in finding, okay, I loved my time in this program, but where can I find a job, or what can I do with this? And that's why those platforms were put in place to say, come on, let's get our heads together and see how we can do this together. I know someone who works here, maybe, you know, I can help you there. So it created this collective.
Everything together. So then
to survive, for all of us to survive with this passion.
Yeah. So what were some of the issues? Because you felt like you had to address certain issues that were going on at Pratt, because you started out, you know, teaching at Pratt.
Mm-hmm. Right after graduation.
And what were some of the issues, and how did you feel like you could create, like what did you create to take upon some of those issues within like the Pratt Department of Fashion?
So I took on a class called Contextualizing Fashion at Pratt, the fall, right after I graduated. So I graduated in the spring of 2013, fall of 2013, hit the ground running teaching, that was a learning curve. I was a TA during my time in the Fashion Studies program, thank goodness, helping teach fashion history. So I kind of got a feel for being in front of a classroom and teaching college students. But it definitely, and I think a lot of teachers and professors say, it takes some years to get it, to really kind of get your stride in what you're doing as a professor. But it was great because that first semester ever of teaching on my own, it helped me grapple with these issues in fashion and introduce them to a very curious and enthusiastic room of students. These were, I primarily teach fashion design students. Sometimes I'll get students from other programs. But they love it. These students at Pratt, now I've been teaching there for 3 years, they just love that fashion design isn't just fashion design. And they love that you can tie what they do to all of these other important issues, fields, phenomena.
That they may not be introduced to just through the regular academic year.
And they just naturally, they already are interested in issues about race or gender.
But you have to introduce it. You have to introduce it to them in a different form where they understand it.
Yeah, sort of. And some of them, they're into it. They like to get deep with you and just they're ready for some, let's get academic and talking about this. And they're already curious about those social issues. And so all I'm doing is being sort of this conduit or this bridge to connecting their life as fashion practitioners, to things that give them purpose in life or that fascinate them, and just say, oh no, we could put this together. You have a passion for feminism. We can tie that together. We can explore that through your dress practice, through your design practice, your studio practice.
And you tied all those different issues, and also at the same time those things that you found by being inspired by your students on certain topics to talk about and you turned that into having your being the host and organizer with the fashion talks, where you talk with people like Stephen Burrows, Adams.
Well, so Stephen Burrows, actually, so how I got into public speaking, while I was in the program, my final year in the program, I had this opportunity from my mentor, Shannon Bell Price, to be a speaker for this group. It was this art group who was looking for a speaker to interview on stage this designer. So I did that. And then their next event was they needed someone to interview Stephen Burrows at the Museum of the City of New York. And so they called on me again because they were pleased with how I did with the other one. And so I was on stage for a conversation with Stephen Burrows, legendary fashion designer, African-American fashion designer. And that went well. And then the Museum of the City of New York liked my talk with Stephen Burrows and said, would you be open to just doing one hosted by us, from the museum, moderating a discussion with him? So I did that. So we did 2 talks in the same summer. And so, and then I did a couple other speaking events. And so with that, my mentor, who was at Pratt Institute and helped get me the job teaching, she was running a lecture series there at Pratt. And she just had a lot on her plate. And she knew that I enjoyed public speaking and said, you know what, do you want to take this over? I know you want to go into public speaking more. And so I emphatically said yes. And so my second year of teaching at Pratt, fall of 2014, is when I became the host and co-organizer of fashion talks. And from there we had many guests like Simon Doonan, Adam Selman last year, Becca McCarran of Chromat, scholar Minha Pham. So it was it's just been a really great experience, and now I'm planning the guests and topics with the assistant chair of fashion, Emily Mader, this fall. So she and I are working together to hopefully put together a really great program that the students will love. And the students have given me feedback on the talks. They really enjoy it. They especially respond well to topics that address issues going on in society. They especially respond well to talks with an actual designer who can break it down for them and say, who can see around the corner and say, look, this is what you're going to deal with after graduation, take it from me. And so it's just become a very important talk series.
So of course, it's very, very great that we talk about, you doing these, you do the fashion talks at Pratt, and you're talking about so many different topics in mind. And it's amazing that you're on the other side of the interview instead of interviewing someone right now. But one specific, topic that I wanted to discuss with you, that I seen that you also were involved in, contributing to an article. I think it was either an event or an article where it was talking about fashion and race.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, we all know that there's a complete absence of, or misrepresentation of, more specifically African Americans and, Asians, but also at the same time, all of those, fit into the minority group. But I went by and, I found these stats, and we're gonna just talk about some of these statistics, when it comes down to fashion and race. So, and this is sponsored by our New York Times. So of the 260 shows, and this is back in 2014, so of the 260 shows on the men's and women's schedule of New York Fashion Week, only 3 of the 260 shows were represented by African American designers, that being Tracy Reeves, Public School, and Hood by Air. And then also at the same time, the percentage of African Americans who are members of the CFDA, 12 out of the 470 are African Americans. And the buying power, but this is the most interesting thing that we've always discussed, I think, in the last decade, that we all knew as African Americans, that our estimated buying power is going to be, it's estimated at 1.3 trillion by 2017. Mm-hmm. And then out of the 214 graduate class of fashion students in the city of New York, FIT had 8%, Parsons had 3%, and Pratt had roughly 2% in 2014. So where that leaves us is what I want to know with some of those statistics that we just talked about, and this is something that you've touched on before in your platform, one of your platforms. Where do we go from here? I mean, what is there? What do we do from here, as far as to?
One thing I've observed is there's these variables that need to be factored into our entry into making change in the world of fashion, in the production and image making of fashion. On the consumption end of fashion, like you said, we're generating trillions of dollars. We shop, but we are supporting brands, magazines, cosmetic companies, clothing lines that I feel pretty confident in saying, don't really value us the way our skin, our bodies, the shape of our bodies, our hair texture. Now we have brands and companies that are helping women, especially with like the natural hair movement, which has been going on for over a decade. Now we have Black women designing products,
which we were
Black women embracing their natural
in the 70s,
right?
Mid 60s, late 70s.
Yeah.
But do you feel like, because the only person, because how we relate to that, Julie Wilson from the Huffington Post.
Now at Essence, she's entered Essence.
Okay, so I've seen where that kind of linked you guys with the whole fashion and race thing, and then there was a video that they done where they were talking about certain people. They were interviewing certain people, and they thought like racism was like out of the door within fashion. but they tore. So the reporter, she bought like all these different magazines, and she tore apart like these magazines of like, okay, we're gonna create one pile of just strictly white based, like where there's white, and then there's African Americans that are on there, and then like the pile was like for African Americans like this small.
Yeah.
And then it's just like the only one that has making a charge is Miss Hardison, Bethan Hardison or whatever, when she wrote the letters to certain and called out certain brands to actually make that change, and they said they seemed to do it. Do you feel like that?
Hold them accountable.
Hold them accountable, yeah.
Just as a side note, I think the video you're talking about, maybe the video with the tearing of the mat, was it for Mike.com?
I'm not sure, but I know I watched it. It was a model that actually.
That's what it was.
Yes, it was a model that has this thing called stand-up fashion.
That is Yomi Abiola, one of my guests for Fashion Talks.
Oh, okay.
2014, proud to say. And she just did a TED Talk, also really great, in Gothenburg, Sweden. A TED Talk about her trajectory as a model and racism that she had to navigate, like relatively recent racism that she had to deal with as a model. But yeah.
But is it where, because, in politics, in the previous, times of, in areas of politics, African Americans have had, people like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Marcus Garvey, those people that actually...
Angela Davis?
Yeah, Angela Davis. Mm-hmm. And then there, in sports, we have, the late Muhammad Ali. There's so many other people in mind that we can think of that were so, vocal about, certain things that are going on within their respective industries. But when you think about the fashion industry, do you think that in order for these things to change, not even just, we're talking about African Americans, but also at the same time we can include Asians and, do you think that we need more of individuals that are on the premises of, being much on a political side, on a socialist side of the fashion industry that are really pushing that, but also at the same time maybe even having those that maybe finding designers and maybe someone, kind of curating their vision around having, taking a part of having a social impact with their designs as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, so there's a couple of ways you can go about it. Could be the designer who's making change by just being present, and when I say present, meaning putting on runway shows, being in all the major magazines, buying into important foundations like the CFDA and being like on the board who makes decisions there. You can do that, without like being like, I guess, like a quote unquote activist or being very like vocal about it, just quietly, doing things like that. Or you could be just a blatant vocal activist. Yeah. I think both methods work and are necessary. So like,
the question is though, does the fashion industry really, really care about that? Because we have, the late, film that just came out, True Cause. And I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen it. So I know about it. I
heard of it. It's about sustainability and, the Rana Plaza, catastrophe back in 2013. But at the very end, they tell you that out of all these big companies that we're talking about, they refuse to make statements. They refuse to comment on their practices, H&M's are and stuff like that. And Levi, they refuse to make comments about, or have a spokesperson even speak about these things. Mm-hmm. And we see it, and the Rana Plaza is one specific example, and that's on a whole different other tangent of what we're, really talking about with race. But do you feel like that the fashion industry even is receptive to those individuals, any individuals becoming activists with also at the same time doing their work, doing, the designs and stuff like that? Do you think it's...
when they stop losing money, no one wants to look bad. No one wants to be part of the problem. It doesn't look good, and so brands, it may not even be genuine. Like, honestly, I'm always sort of apprehensive when it comes to sort of this, not activist fashion, but it's sort of like altruistic campaigns for fashion. If you buy this, or if you purchase this, you're going to help this person, or you're going to help us with this tribe of people in this, one country. And I feel like some of those things are needed, but I don't know. I just feel like we just have to find a new way to do things in fashion business, because you'll also have companies who've just done a lot of dirt, and then all of a sudden, they're into kind of activism and doing things for women's rights, or, it's just, I don't know how I feel about that.
So how do you see yourself? I mean, because you're in the education sector, which is, at the end of the day, that's one of the most important things where it starts, where it can start at. Like, how do you plan on evolving, within the education, using education as a platform to, to tackle some of these, issues?
Well, education's number one. I know it sounds so cliche, but it's education and experience is number one. And so I guess kind of going back to your initial question about what can we do, like where do we go from here? So I teach students of all cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, racial backgrounds at Pratt and Parsons. And so that's my number one job, and just teaching my students about fashion studies, fashion history. I also teach fashion history, just all inclusive. But I'm teaching a class this fall at Parsons called Fashion and Race, and we will be exploring all these things you and I are trying to figure out. And in terms, though, and I kind of mentioned this during the Fashion and Race panel I spoke on a few months ago at Parsons, one thing in particular for African American or students in the African diaspora who are just trying to be seen and just have a piece of the pie, it's going to start with education. And with education, you need people like me who can show them that the person at the front of the room isn't always, white, who can incorporate readings into the curriculum or the syllabus that speak to their culture too. We're not just going to talk about Dior and Chanel and Yves Saint Laurent all day. We can also talk about Elizabeth Keckley and Anne Lowe, Black designers or dressmakers. So that these students feel like, I'm part of fashion history too, So education, that's number one.
You're Jeffrey Banks, a lot of people forget
Patrick Kelly,
yes.
Stephen Burrows, yeah, I'm sure that, and so many more. And now today we have Charles Harbison, so among others. And so starting with education and that foundation and letting them know that what they're doing matters. But also from a financial perspective, because I've also experienced this when speaking to prospective students, economics can be the biggest stumbling block. If you're not all Black students are in a desperate financial situation. That's a common misconception, but for several students, they are in a desperate situation. And when it comes down to their family, getting them into school, into higher education, and seeing what they're going to study, and then you're like, I want to do fashion design. Not to diminish the importance of fashion design at all. That's my whole job. But, if, you only have so much money to push, your child into college, that's a risky industry. And so that's another reason why we don't have enough Black students coming in.
The parents don't believe that it is that taking a career path such as that's valuable. It's it's going to bring you, but
not surefire pathway to financial success.
I think the only thing, I was having a conversation with someone in Alabama about that, specifically about parents not believing in their kids that want to go into the arts, because primarily the things that we enjoy the most in grade school are arts and crafts. And one thing that they said was that the only thing that has brought our parents that are come from the generation before now is that shows like Project Runway has helped. And America's Next Top Model and stuff like that, because that's been going on since I was in high school, very, very early, freshman, sophomore year, whatever. So those things have kind of helped, visual wise, actually them seeing, younger, individuals, making a name for themselves and stuff like that. But I do think in some form of fashion, the cotton trade, of course we all know how big that was in the South, and how things were able to, a lot of people were able to capitalize on that industry within itself. And that
was like the core of the fashion industry.
Yeah. And of course we, but one last question, how do you guys within, the education system, who makes, or how do they make decisions on restructuring the curriculum to an industry such as fashion that is forever changing? So how does that work? Because you have students that particularly, the industry is always changing. So it's like, how do they restructure their curriculum? I mean, is it every year or?
No, it doesn't happen often at all. But thankfully, I've been able to, as I sit on the committee at Pratt, where I'm able to help make decisions, kind of like what I was saying with how important it is for Black designers to join the CFDA or some other. It doesn't have to be the CFDA, but an organization in your region or town where you can sit on a board and help make decisions about how the business is going to be run, and make these decisions that are ultimately going to impact the fashion industry. Same thing when, like, Kerry Washington was talking about how important it was for her to be a part of the committee, I guess, for the Academy Awards. I don't know if committee is the right word. I don't know about the film industry, but how important it was for her to be in that decision-making process.
The one
Yeah, be that person.
Yeah.
So that you can be sitting in on the room that's making these decisions. So going back to me, that's why it's important and why I'm thankful to be able to sit on the curriculum committee. I can't make huge waves, but at least I get to sit there and take part in the decision-making process. And again, just be a professor that adds some diversity to perhaps students who've never even had a Black instructor, period, in their whole life. So
it's a great, I think it's a great, what you're tackling as far as, that being your first, course that you're, building. I think that's great. Not even just for the African American, culture within itself, but I think in the time period that we're in right now.
I was gonna say, I guess just responding a little bit more to your question, also this is a great time just for the students in general, with Black Lives Matter, with this increase in body positivity that young people are seeing, these kind of trends that I'm seeing of embracing who you are, from your hair to your body to everything about you, just embracing it and loving yourself. Just seeing all these initiatives coming out, it's kind of inspiring students to be more bold and think outside the box and realize that anything really is possible for them.
What does this time now, what period does this time remind you of? What period in the past does this time right now remind you of?
I guess in the most broad sense, the 60s, late 60s.
Okay.
I've seen comparisons to that.
I was going to say the 1970s.
Yeah, late 60s, 1968.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then maybe early 70s. Yeah.
Because everyone.
I can see that.
Yeah, because everyone is embracing their voice, and but yeah, I think
in a very theatrical way.
Social media is this before it was dressing boldly, riding around in these weird little, cars and, galvanizing together and, going anywhere and, making a boy count or whatever, but it's on social media, it's using social media, it's using media itself to get your point across. So, and I think you're doing a great job at getting not just your point across, but you're actually combining and collaborating the efforts and the minds of other people, which in a way, like you said, you don't feel like you're making any waves, but also at the same time you're making a wave before the title comes.
Mm-hmm.
So I really do appreciate you taking out your time on today. And is there something, last minute, if it's a quote or if it's a few words that you could leave out to someone out there?
I have advice. Which I always say with talks from panel discussions, and it's because I can't emphasize this enough to my students, and that's to find a mentor. And even if you're not a student listening to this right now, if you're just at a stage in your life, maybe even not the traditional age, like maybe you're in this career change and you're in your 30s or your 40s, find a mentor. Find someone who's doing something, who's already there, kind of, or mostly there in what you want to do, and find a way to connect with them. Initiate a conversation with them, or take them out to coffee or something, and just let them know that you admire what they do, and it's kind of set a framework for what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if all goes well, with time, they'll take you under their wing and help guide you. It's so important to have that mentor. And also a peer, like a collective, like some people who are keeping you motivated and helping either on your level or a couple steps ahead. And everything just kind of falls into place with people like that, because they take you where you need to go. So stay around people who inspire you or do what you want to do, create your own collective, go out to dinner and talk about your struggles, your triumphs, and just, because there's so much more, and this has been my experience, you can achieve so much more collectively with people who are also maybe just figuring it out with you, but they know they want to,
get somewhere.
Get somewhere
with
with
you.
you.
Somewhere, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, mentor and a collective or peers.
Well, I thank you for taking the opportunity and switching seats in
Yeah.
this talk. And I do thank you again, Miss Kimberly Jenkins, educator and researcher. Thank you for being on the False Image Fashion Podcast.
Thank you for having me.